Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel here, and today I'm going to be sharing with you all a video on mixing our acrylic paints and also setting up a workstation when it comes to using acrylic paints, or how I go about setting up my workstation here. So this video is pretty much catered to beginners or those that may not have been using acrylic paints for a little while, and they want to kind of get a little bit of refresher before they get geared back up. So right now, without further ado, I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen with you all and show you a little bit of the process that I go about this. All right. Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about is setting up the workstation. So as you can see here, I've got a couple of cups of water here. I've got one primarily used for adding water on the tip of my brush and adding the acrylic paints, and the other, which is a little bit got some acrylic mix in there, and that's primarily used for actually cleaning your brushes. The other thing is I use paper plates most of the time when applying my acrylic paints, but I also have usually keeping handy a second empty plate for just mixing my acrylic paints. And of course, you want to have your paper towels and your handy dandy brushes in hand for whichever size brushes or type of brush that you're going to be using for your project. And then of course your canvas or your paper that you're going to be using for your actual painting project. So let's jump into this here. Okay. So when mixing acrylic paints, for example, as you can see on my paper here, I've got some, and I kind of got a little bit of work going on here, but if you could see, I've got some dark areas here. I've got this dark brown, and I've got, again, my kind of bluish green color here. And if I'm going to be mixing a lighter brown color, what I'm going to do is, from my actual paint palette, I'm going to pick up a good amount. If you could see that, I'm going to pick up a good amount of paint of this brown on my brush. So you can see good amount of that. Then I'm going to take some white. I'm going to grab some of this white, add it in there. You see I pick it up on the edge of that brush. Then I'm going to go over here to my clean palette, and then I'm going to kind of, in a vertical motion, I'm going to mix that color. So I get that mix on the tip of my brush. Not like so, not like that, but I'm going to mix this in a vertical motion. Okay, vertically. Okay. Pick up some more white because I want it a little bit lighter. And again, vertical motion, vertical motion. Vertical motion. You want to kind of mix all that paint that you've got on your brush. You want to kind of get a good mix in there. And you can see I've pretty much got a substantial amount of paint on the tip of that brush. Now this brush is dry, so depending on your ultimate goal here, when you're applying this second layer and over these darker areas, depending on what your ultimate goal is, what you're trying to achieve here with this second layer will determine the amount of water that you actually need to put on your brush when you apply this paint. But for this step here, this brush here that I'm using is completely dry. So now I can come in here with the paint that I've got on the brush, and with the tapping motion, I can like go into this entire area and cover this entire area. I could cover this entire area if I want with this second layer. Okay. Now, I can set this aside now. I'm going to pick up a new brush, a very fresh brush. And this brush, I'm going to add water on the tip of this brush. I'm going to add some water on the tip of this brush, and we're going to see the difference. I'm going to douse it in there, but I'm going to add water on just on the tip of this brush. Come off the side here. Okay. And I'm going to pick up more of this light color mix that I just made on the tip of this brush. So I'm picking this up. I want it to be a little bit lighter. So I'm going to add a little bit of titanium white on there and add a little bit more here. So now this brush here is a little bit damp. And when you have a little bit of a damp brush or a damp brush and you're adding a second layer on top of this darker layer, what's going to happen is this bottom layer is going to bleed. This paint on this bottom layer will bleed. It will bleed into the second layer that you're adding. So if you could see here, I don't know if you could see that. You could see here, so that second layer that I've added on top of there is not as dark. So if you're ultimately wanting to have this second layer completely like overlap this bottom darker layer here, what you're gonna have to do is use a dry brush to prevent that bleed from coming through. So dry brush will save you sometimes from adding 2 or 3 layers on top, as opposed to using what I have here, a brush that's damp. So I hope that this video helps you all, or those who are just kind of starting out when it comes to mixing acrylic paints and adding them onto a second layer or on top of a darker layer here. And again, remember, always kind of have that second palette if you're using paper plates as a backup when it comes to mixing your paints. So as you save yourself a little bit of trouble or confusion of adding or mixing your colors where your actual paints are. And it's always good, again, to have those 2 cups of handy dandy water always there for you, and with your paper towels. So stay tuned for more videos and tips when it comes to using our acrylic paints. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you on the next round. Thanks, everybody.